Welcome to episode 14 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with MixedByTrae, who is a Melbourne-based mixing and mastering engineer. We talked about having great communication with your clients, which then allows you to have potentially uncomfortable conversations. And we talk heaps about mixing and mastering. So if you love mixing and mastering, this is an episode for you. Stay tuned. This is episode 14 of What's That Sound podcast.
You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts.
Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound. My name's Stu Watts. Today I'm here with MixedByTrae. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good, man. Thanks for joining us today.
No, of course. Thanks for having me here.
No worries. Let's get into it. Kick it off with a bit of an about you, who some of the people you've worked with, what you do in the industry, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm a mixing and mastering engineer. I'm originally from Queensland. I've been here for about 4 years now. Some people I've worked with. I work with a lot of independent artists in Melbourne.
Yep.
Some names that some people might know are like Oliver Munn, Remedy. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, I know it's hard.
It's hard to bring it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a lot of different sort of independent artists.
Nice. Yeah, man, you've been very active from what I've seen, obviously working closely with Matt and AU Dollars and stuff. He's always, letting me know about, engineers and producers that are working with people in the scene and stuff. And your name is on a lot of those artists that he likes to showcase on AU Dollars and stuff like that.
No,
stuff. It's pretty sick.
That man is tapped in.
He definitely is. So let's take it back to the start, man. Where did music come into your life?
Oh, damn. I think music's always kind of like been around from like really young. I think like my parents just always like playing music.
Yep.
And then I remember from like an earlier age, like I had a friend who owned a drum kit, and then that's kind of like where a bit more love and passion got into it. So I was actually like a drummer for like 7 years earlier on in my life, but. My parents used to like play a lot of like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blink-182.
Love it.
And a lot of like pop stuff, like the Final Countdown. And I remember my mum would always play like, those DVDs where they just have all the music videos.
Yeah.
They play from like
the compilation.
Yeah,
ones.
the compilations. Yeah. So that was like the Sunday ritual. My mum would be like cleaning the house and stuff, and it would just be music on CD. So I think that's kind of like where like it started.
Yep.
And then I think through high school, it was always something that like just got me through school. Was just music, kind of just being there. It was kind of like an escape, really. And then I actually originally wanted to be a fighter pilot,
right?
In the Air Force. So I studied extremely hard to like get into that position. And then I like failed 3 questions short of one of their exams, and it was actually like a 12-month sitting period to like resit it.
Wow.
So in that 12 months, because I come from a small country town in Queensland, it was kind of like, oh, I need to get out of here. Type thing. And music was always like in the back of my mind, like, a lot of people always like, oh, the industry's so hard to get into, like, but I kind of was like, oh, might as well just give it a shot. And I was looking at like audio engineering, and I was looking at the degrees and that sort of stuff. So it was just kind of like, or like, why not? I enjoy maths and stuff. So a lot of it was kind of like, oh, like if it was to be me to be a part of the music, it's like, how do I become a part of that? And I felt like possibly audio engineering could have been that like, that entry point to just being a part of something that's like really important to me.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate, especially with like, I don't know, the maths thing. To me, it stands out. Like I was okay at maths, and I like that, like, geeky side of music where it's like, based on science. You know? And you don't think about it very often in that term, but it actually is. It's like, it's all scientific, it's all mathematic.
It's pretty deep. It's like, how can frequencies make you feel emotion, make you want to dance? Like, that's always what kind of intrigues me. It's just like, you'd have so many different sort of genres of music, and
So who were the early influences for you? What music like made you feel good at in the teenage years? And stuff?
Teenage years. Okay, so teenage years. It's for me, music is just I like all different genres. I like respect all sorts of music, but the most that I listened to around was actually like Aussie hip hop.
Cool.
I grew up around like, growing up a lot, listening to like 360, like Illy, Pez, Horror Show.
Yeah.
Like, because I've got an older brother, and he was very much like, I think because of his age and stuff, it was just kind of like what everyone was listening to.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
other than that, it was actually like a lot of like pop music. Like we grew up around like the time where like LimeWire was a thing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you'd be downloading all the latest sort of songs and stuff. So I'd be listening to like a lot of like, Akon, Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, yep.
So a lot of pop stuff as well. And I feel like that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from.
Yep.
That sort of like modern, the Billboard sort of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And then on the back end, it was just like Red Hot Chili Peppers and like Blink 182, where I still have this like appreciation for high energy sort of like punk stuff, which is like so fun.
And so you said you were looking into the audio engineering stuff. Did you actually study it?
So I did study it. I studied at SAE in Byron Bay.
Yeah, right.
So
That'd be cool.
I moved away at home at 18. So it was like 6 hours away.
Yep.
My brother was studying cinematography at the time.
Yep.
Shout out Axel. I had to crash with him for like a little bit, trying to work out what I was going to do with my life. And so started studying there, and then through life and, kind of like putting it aside and traveling and coming back, I restarted studying in Melbourne, and then further actually dropped out.
Yeah, right.
To pursue music full time.
Yeah.
Because I felt like everyone has their own opinion on.
Yeah, well, I always like to explore that a bit. So, like, how did you feel about school? Like, what were the positives and negatives?
I think, the main positives like would have been just like learning and getting into like the nitty gritties of like studio, just the, signal flow, like the real basics.
Yeah.
But I feel like what they promoted, what you were going to have in the experiences, wasn't kind of like aligning to what like I needed.
Sure.
And for me, being away from, from somewhere, like I moved to a place where I didn't know anyone. The main positive for me would have been meeting people, but I felt like I didn't have that enough. I was meeting people that were kind of like wanting to do different things than me. So the collaboration wasn't necessarily there.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a shame. I wanted to work with like hip hop and modern stuff and people recording bands and stuff, which is fine. It's great to learn, but it's just like
it kind of can feel like a bit of a waste of your time in a way, because
exactly.
You've got this like picture of what you want to be doing, and every day that you rock up and you're like, it's just not right on what I want to do. So you just feel like you're just sitting there. Fair enough, man. And then so from there, tell us about like how it started with the engineering. Like as like
how did I get into it?
Yeah,
full time.
Full-time.
Oh yeah. So basically around the time when I was living in Melbourne, I think it was like 3-4 years ago. I remember seeing like an Instagram sort of like ad kind of pop up, and it was Oliver Munn. This was really earlier in his sort of SoundCloud days, and I remember just like listening to it and being like, this guy's got like potential.
Yeah.
And also I didn't have like a lot of friends.
Yep.
So I reached out and was like, hey man, like rah, like this is what I do. Like I'm kind of learning to be like a mixing engineer. Like do you need a hand? Like do you want to collaborate? Like let's meet up and try and like, see if we vibe type thing. And we ended up just creating like a really good friendship, and we're really comfortable with each other. And then he originally he was already planning, because he is just like one of the hardest working people that I know.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm going to do a song a week for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I think at uni at the start, because I was still at uni then, we were learning about mastering.
Yep.
So I understood like a similar sort of like understanding of like what to do to kind of make a track sound better.
Sure.
And through Olive's singles a week, I was mastering each of those singles, not necessarily mixing, because he was very particular with what he wanted, which was fine, because that trust grew a lot longer down the line. but it was just being a part of those singles and then, DJing for some of his gigs and then, because he was already in the scene and he had been in the scene for a long time. So I think that really kind of like helped me meet people and get my name out there a little bit more than what it was before.
Yeah. Well, I think also listening to his stuff is every song's different.
Yeah.
So you would have
super
been
versatile.
Yeah, well, that's it. And you would have been through just like that exposure to different, slightly different styles each time.
Yeah.
Your ears would have been learning, okay, this sits in a different frequency. How do I get it to either, tame it or boost it or anything like that? And you would have been practicing.
It was a lot of experimentation. Like, not gonna lie, like I listen back to those stuff and obviously I'm like, wow. But at the time it was like, okay, it's better than what it was. So, and from that he gained a lot of really, really good sort of like eyes on him as well. And as we kind of grew together and then him getting his first like Spotify editorial and then getting played on the radio and like all those sorts of things, it just kind of like really helped kind of put myself out there more.
Yeah. Yep. And so to learn, more in depth, was it all just like trialing stuff or was it a lot of like online tutorials, things like that?
It was, I think it was like a mix of everything really. So I did learn mastering from like, like someone, and we had like a mastering studio that we could use. And learning those fundamentals and kind of breaking down that wall of like what mastering is, it kind of like opened up the opportunity to work with more artists and be like, oh yeah, like I can master a song.
Yeah.
So before even becoming like a mixing and mastering engineer, it's because people didn't want to pay for a mix because the mix price was like more than what my mastering price was going for. So a lot of people were hitting me up just for like easy masters. So I actually, at the start, I was mastering a lot more songs than I was like mixing.
Sure.
So I ended up mastering like 100 or something songs before even like really getting the work in for like mixing. I think it only like started after like me and Olive were like really like working on the people. It's always like a weird thing trying to start making money from, it's like, where do you start? Like, where do you put your rates? Like, how do you price yourself?
Yep.
Especially it's like you need experience, opportunities, and
for sure,
a lot of trial and error.
For sure. How long was that period of where you were like uncertain of it until the point where you were like, no, I'm very confident that this is my rate?
Well, I think like now, I think it's taken me a long time.
Yeah.
It's obviously, I think in the industry that we're in, it's really hard because I'm working with so many independent people. It's like, I'm not working with label budgets or anything like that. So it's always like, I try and make myself like as accessible as possible.
Yep.
Especially if it's music that I want to work on.
Yes.
I think it's really important to kind of help because at the end of the day, like I'm doing this full time and they're trying to be in a place where they're doing it full time.
Absolutely.
So it's like a,
symbiotic relationship.
Oh, I want to help the community up.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I won't grow myself more as an engineer as long as this community keeps on growing as well.
I think people notice that, just based on experience and just seeing other people do things in whatever field they're in, whether it's mixing or whether it's photography or anything like that. I think you just see that the relationship part of it is so important.
So important.
And if you damage that by just being, cut to the chase, very transactional.
No, exactly.
People aren't really going to vibe with you and they're not going to trust you necessarily as easy as they would if you're, a good person.
Yeah, and that's not who I am as well. Like it's hard. Like for me, it's hard to kind of strictly make it just business as well. I'm still in that learning curve of being a bit more like, like, strategic. Oh, hey, like, this is more business orientated than like me being like a friend. And I've like had the experience of like people walking over me and, you live and you learn.
Yeah.
Because it is still a cutthroat industry.
Yep.
But
well, I think it's the funny thing with like, it's not funny. It's like it's sort of and this is a lot of the reason why I want to do this stuff is because I want to have more conversation around those sorts of things where people can actually have an understanding of how do you address that conversation,
Oh, yeah.
How do you actually talk about finances? How do you confidently
hard.
Just say, let's have a chat, let's figure out where you're at, where I'm at, and not have that, uncertainty of, am I getting walked over? Am I going to regret this? All those sorts of things. So
it's like I feel like there's like a big middle ground because there are a lot of clients that I have that are actually like close friends. I think with my friends, it's harder to make that sort of conversation, but I'm realizing I'm gaining like a bit more worth as I work in this industry where they trust me and I trust them, and that's how it should be. I feel like when someone doesn't have trust in you, that's when it becomes sticky, and that's when there's issues.
Absolutely, and that's where clear communication from the start.
Yes, exactly.
It's
huge.
It's
so important.
It's so important because the stuff that you leave unsaid later comes back to bite you because, and it's not necessarily through that other person's fault either. It's, if you haven't talked about it, sometimes it's like, well, how are they to know as well?
Yeah.
And they might not know what is, especially if they're just starting out in their first 1 or 2, 3 years.
No, exactly.
It's like that you don't necessarily know what is the right thing to do. So you just kind of do what you feel is like, I guess I'll do this. So do you remember having any people that you looked up to in the first few years of mixing and mastering? Were there sonics that you were like, I need to get to that at all, or was it all just self I'm discovering?
I think
myself?
It's always because for me becoming more down the line with the mixing my appreciation for pop music is on a whole nother level other than after the years of diving in and really kind of understanding these engineers can really they can do their job even though some people in our field can really argue about over compression, all this stuff, but I'm hey, if they can make a song that sounds great anywhere, props. You're in a Coles and you hear something that's so clear and stuff, but then also being able to work with so many different genres, I try and have this sort of focus where it's my inspirations of pop. So it's for every song, it's just I kind of want the vocals to be really, really upfront and present and the focal point.
Yes.
And then it's everything else. Vocals for me come first.
Sure.
And,
well, I was going to say that listening to, your catalog, the music that you work on isn't just in one genre.
Yeah.
Sure, it's pop based, right? And it's melodic and intelligibility of vocals and clear drum sounds, instrumentation. But I think what I like about it is it's not one set style sonically either.
No.
Your drum sounds aren't always the same.
Yeah.
The way that the kick and bass aren't mixed the same in every song and stuff like that. So is that intentional? Is it I'm purely listening to what I'm given and I'm addressing it from there? I'm feeling whatever.
Yeah, it's not, every song is different. And then I just think about the final outcome, how is the song meant to sound? But then like you were saying about communication, what does the client need it to sound like? Yeah. It's what songs do you listen to? What songs do you like? What song have you been replaying nonstop? Yeah. Tell me what it is, because their expectation of this is what sounds good because it's what's doing numbers or it's from an A+ artist. That's kind of the playing field, and you're trying to match that competitively. It's really important. But the difference in between 808s and bass guitars and synths and all that sort of stuff. It's to me, it's just I try and do I do what sounds good, and working with talented producers here and there as well. It's just sometimes the beat doesn't need too much anyway. Just a little rebalance and. I learned from just years on, you used to just start from compressors on everything as well, EQs on everything. And it's just I feel if it's kind of there sonically and they just need a little bit of a balance or, compression here and there, multi-band, it's just
sure.
you just do it and then but like intention to have that vocal be like sitting in the pocket. Like,
so would you say then vocals are your favorite things to
work
on?
I love vocals. There's something about like, definitely.
What do you look for in a good vocal, and what do you determine a bad vocal that needs a lot of work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because it's hard because I work, because the genres I work with, like you could listen to it and you could be like, oh, this is like, you can tell that it's a one take, but like some people's one takes are incredible.
Absolutely.
And then you can hear those other takes where, for instance, Remedy, where she really, really like takes the time to perfect her takes, and you can hear how much like effort she's put into those takes, and it's incredible. And her harmonies and everything, she's so pedantic about it, but like in the best way possible. So it's hard. I think at the moment it's the artists that still don't have an understanding of like tune, or feel like auto tune can fix everything. And I try and like, I always like 100% honest with like my clients. I'm always like, hey, like, this can be better. Like if you have the time, you should try. And I always give like, like tips and tricks, like, oh, you should try recording with auto tune on, even though you don't need to have auto tune, but it'll help you learn what notes to hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll tell you if it's off.
Yeah, you get that feeling.
It'll tell you if it's flat. Snapping. You can hear it. Yeah. And some people, it's just a learning curve. But even so, like, like I'm working with some trap artists as well, like where recording situations aren't the best. And most of the artists I work with are in bedroom studios. It's just the,
it's the nature of our industry.
It's just what it is like, especially after COVID. And then, I don't know. It's just really trying to like make that vocal sound as best as it can. It doesn't matter where it's come from.
It is a fun thing with vocals when you do get them from, different sources and stuff. And it is always like, now that I think about it, like I always leave vocals to last because I want them to like sit in the mix after I've mixed all the music. And to me, that just makes sense. To make it squeeze in, and then I can easily tell if something's off in the music. Or it's like, okay, this is definitely clashing with the vocals or whatever. And other people work different ways, but it is a fun thing to do when you get some vocals that are just like harsh in 3K or like over compressed. It's like, cool, now I get to do my job. I actually get to like attack it and figure out what I need to do to get this to sound awesome. Super fun.
It's definitely like a learning curve, especially with each song being different, each artist being different, each genre being different.
For sure.
And it's like so fluid now.
For sure. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. And let's get into your actual sessions. Do they look the same all the time? Do you have templates set up? Like, how do you start a session?
Yeah, I've got like a basic sort of template, and it's more just like a few like return channels with like parallel compression and that sort of stuff. But I try not to like, I don't want it to be like the same each time. But I think my workflow is that, especially with the type of music that I'm working on, even though it like you said, it still kind of comes back to that like vocal pop sort of stuff. But, I just drag in the stems, I check it all out. And then like you, I do like work around the beat first and get the beat hitting nice. And then it's like vocals. And then it's kind of like because I started with like kind of mastering songs, I have this like overview of, I want it to sound like the final, like that. I think it's so important that the artist isn't like, oh, this is going to get fixed in the master, because the people's misconception of like what mastering is, it's like very can be like debilitating sometimes as well.
Yeah, because I guess, unless you've actually looked into it, you have no idea.
You have no idea, no.
And people can explain it to you, but it still doesn't necessarily make sense.
No.
But
like still like a good master can really like do wonders on a song as well. Like you can definitely, you you can like miss something that gets picked up and stuff. And I'm still yet to kind of shop around, and I've had some bad experiences with like other mastering engineers, and these were like people with like platinum records and stuff. And I'm just like,
wow.
It's a shame because I would like, love to learn something from that, but then you get it back and it's like, why does it sound like this? And you're like, it doesn't. Like we had some on Oliver Munn's like EP. So I mixed the entire project, and the entire project was mastered by this guy who was working with his team. And you can just hear that he didn't care, and that hurts my soul.
Yeah. You get,
And they put it out anyway, and you can hear like pumping on one of the songs. And I'm like, how do you miss this?
Yeah.
How do you have the single be like, extremely loud, and then everything else is like lacking, like doesn't have the same polish? I'm like,
it's an interesting one. I feel like, you can tell. I think you can tell as well, and that's why it's so important that you can find, personnel that work with you. And it's cool to try different things out, and you never know what you're missing, but once you've got the people that you can trust, like,
no, exactly,
and just nail it every time, like you're
you're
I know this is gonna work. So it's like, but I think you made another important point, that having the good source material so that you can have an easier mix, I think is really important. And a lot of that time it comes back to the mixing engineer of educating the artist and being like you said, with the auto tune or mic technique, or
it's so particular. But like at the end of the day, it's like, if this is a client that's going to stick around, it's going to make my job easier. It's going to make their work better.
Yes.
Like I feel like at the moment, there's a lot of finicky things that I don't do. Like I don't do recording. Like I don't enjoy recording as like an engineer.
Yep.
I feel like sometimes I just don't have the energy to help the artist get to what they need.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's like as simple as like timing and vocal editing and like cutting out breaths and stuff. So each artist is different. One artist might want their breaths, one artist might not. So it's like, you know what? I'm not going to deal with that as like an engineer. The artist can do that. They can deal with that. They can cut it and like fix it up. And if it's something that I feel like, something's clipping or something, like I can just fix it quickly.
Sure, yeah. But
in terms of like tune, the timing and the vocal editing, I leave that up to the artist now.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, if I change the timing and the timing's wrong, it's like my fault. So it's like, it's better to like help the artist kind of understand that, that stuff in terms of like structure and everything as well.
Yeah.
Can like be all them. And
And
so when it comes to me, it's easy. Yeah.
It's really empowering, I think, for an artist. From my experience, artists want to learn as well. Like everyone just wants to do the best that they can do.
Yeah.
And if we can be people, whether it's our job or not, whether we can educate people on, hey, maybe next time do this, do that.
Yeah.
It actually lets them know that you care.
Yeah.
For one. And like you said, you just get a better result. It empowers them. They feel more confident when they're sending you stems as well.
Exactly.
You just notice over time when you've been working with people and you communicate heaps and you give them feedback and they give you feedback, that it just gets easier. And they actually feel better about sending something to you.
Yeah, more trust.
And in the start, they might be like, oh, it's not right. It doesn't, I need you to do this. I need it. And then once it's like 6 or 7 or 8 songs in, they're like, do your thing. Because you know exactly what I want.
No, exactly.
And it's just so much better.
It's a beautiful feeling as well to have like an artist kind of like really kind of trust you, or, they understand that you know what they want and what sound or what effects to use and what sort of space. But it's that relationship. So it's like, for me, I'm trying to build as many relationships with as many people as possible in that sense to, help the community.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any sort of, I hate the word, but hacks of things that you've learnt over time that have sped up your workflow?
Ooh, yeah, I think like a good mix bus for sure. And then, if something is like, because your mix bus can tonally shape the entire song as well. It was, for me, what took my mixes to the next level was understanding multi-band compression.
Yep.
To me, that was kind of like never really something that I even kind of knew of until I saw like Alex Toomey like talk about the C4 or something,
Yep.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And then understanding that sort of process helped me understand compression even further.
Totally.
Which was, it's what I needed. It's like,
I mean, compression is hard enough.
No, I know.
It takes years to fully grasp it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know anyone that gets it straight away.
A good way to explain it is if you've got a signal, the compressor's giving that signal a hug. And the attack is like how quickly you hug. And then the release is how like quickly you let go of that hug. That's the best way that I could visually kind of sense like, you're giving the signal a hug.
Yeah.
The compressor, that was the easiest way because it took me a long time from starting studying to kind of like understand like what I was hearing. Mm-hmm. And it does take like a while to kind of like do that.
Multiband's huge though. Multiband is huge, I use it in mixing all the time.
Multiband, like with like expansion as well.
Expansion, whatever it needs, and you can use it as an EQ tool as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. It's like it can so easily. It's like a one tool that can really significantly shape each individual channel, each bus, and the master bus.
It's gold.
Yeah, it is.
It's so good.
It is. So if you haven't like taken note, learn multiband.
Multiband, especially with the artists who are doing it themselves. Like, understand multiband, understand what it's doing to your vocals. Don't overuse it, but
because you can quite easily get out of control with it. Yeah,
I've done that many times.
Yeah, for sure.
You realize you're like, oh, why does my vocal sound kind of lifeless? Mm-hmm. And then I like look at my chain and then realize that my multiband is like
30
going
decibels of compression,
crazy the entire like frequency. I'm like, let's just bypass those ones, and then it just opens up.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get nerdy. Let us expand on some of your favorite pieces of gear. Do you use any hardware?
No, I don't, sadly.
That's cool.
I mean, like, other than my UAD, like Apollo.
Yep.
I've just got my trusty monitors. I got a pair of Focal PK Alphas.
Cool.
And I don't think they make them anymore. I think they stopped. I think they like released a new monitor, which is a bit scary because I'm like, these are great. Yeah. So maybe they, like, I don't know, made them better.
Focal's crazy. I've listened to them in another studio. I haven't owned them. These are the only monitoring setup that I've ever had.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. What do you like about the Focals? Is it?
I don't know. I think like when I first started using them, it was just like I was hearing. I think it's just like as you go down that like level of, more expensive like monitoring systems and stuff. Mm-hmm. And because like I do everything out of my bedroom still.
Yep.
I feel like it was a very like good sort of like flat. Mm-hmm. And the tweeters were really, really nice, and just the overall sound and the width and stuff just kind of felt perfect. And now it's like, I've been working with them for 2 years, and it's just like I've really kind of like enjoyed listening to music on them. And if I get a mix like that's sitting nice and I'm like enjoying it, I'm like, okay, I trust this. I know it's going to be like, it's going to be really good in the car. And
absolutely. And that's one of those things over time that in itself is somewhat of a hack, is like learning your or like monitoring setup,
monitoring
whether
space,
that's headphones
everything.
or speakers or your room or anything. All of that stuff is so important to translating mix elsewhere. And like you said, once I'm always pushing up 100 hertz in the kick or something like that, better not do that in the future. It just makes your mixing process so much and mastering process so much quicker. So love that. What about let's go into plugins. EQ. What are some of your favorite EQs?
I think like the Pro Q3, like always. I think that's like a very like basic stock standard for I don't know. I feel like it's like really helpful. Even though you visually it can be like a an easy hack to like see sort of like what's like happening, and especially when you're like referencing other songs, you just slap it on. It's got the analyzer. You can be like, oh yeah, I can see that they've dipped here to leave more room for that. So you can just do that on your own.
Yep.
But like I've always used the Pro Q3 in terms of like vintage EQs, like the Pultec. Pultec's a big one because pop vocals.
Oh yeah.
And kick and bass. And the kick and bass, that like the boost attenuate Trae.
It's
godly.
It's so good.
Godly.
On kicks,
it's good.
And bass, like
bass,
live bass.
Yeah.
Just to get that fullness, you like boost like the 30 hertz.
Yeah.
And it just feels
it's
so
good.
warm.
Well, so, like sometimes as well, like like through like mastering people, it's just like, you know, sometimes like, you know, you get a song and it's just like lacking a lot of low end and you're like really confused of like why. And it's just like, yeah, you just.
And I think some people, you know, you hear that classic put a high pass on everything that you hear like so often.
Yeah.
And you also hear everyone dismissing it so often. So it must be really hard for people that are first starting out. I can't remember what I did when I first did it, but you know.
Hey, like sometimes it, you know, again, like if you can't hear it, then either it'll add up as well. But sometimes it's just like, you know, sometimes you don't have to overthink those sort of small things. Like, you know, your consumers aren't listening in a space that has perfect subs. They're probably listening in a car with blown subs. You know, they can't even hear the bass.
AirPods that aren't getting that much bass anyway.
But yeah.
I think I want to come back to something that you said about the Pro Q, which is great, is you're using it as a learning tool. You know, you're actually evaluating what other people's mixes are doing by just using the analyzer. It's such a simple thing to do, but it expands your understanding of music and sonics, and I love that.
Yeah, it's really, it's helpful. You know, like yeah, you can like hover over the frequencies and it can be like, oh yeah, you know, these frequencies are boosting for whatever reason, and if you do struggle with like learning like what frequencies are what, like it helps visually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like everyone should get the Fab Filter plugins because they're like really, really good investment.
Absolutely. What about compression?
I'm still using like a bit of the waves. Like my go-to compressors are RVox and then 76. And then like a LA2A, like all UAD, except for the RVox. There's something about it that gives it like a nice like front in your face, quick, easy. Sometimes it can be too much, but you know, other than that, sometimes like on the SSL, I have like I've got the Plugin Alliance bundle, so they've got some great emulators of the SSL.
Absolutely.
And that has like a nice compressor. You know,
I
like.
What do you like using that on? Because I've always found the SSL compressor extremely difficult to use. I don't like it on much.
I think like rap vocals. You know, it just like gives it that sort of sound that is very like, you know, thanks to like people like Alex Sume who have just used the SSL and they've shown that it's like and that's what I've like come to realize as well, is that the EQs that you use, it really determines on the sort of genres. Because sometimes it's like some people want that really like high cut, bright vocals, and then sometimes it's like like you can use the pull tech to make it more full and boost attenuate again, and so but compressors, LA2A is definitely like it's nice.
I mean, I've had so many people on this podcast say that, and I just need to use it more. I think like because I like it. I've just never loved it. And I really think that I should just go deep into it. Every time I hear
final chain source.
Every time I hear, you know, obviously multiple people saying the same thing, but also when I'm like, I don't fully get it, that's when I really think that I need to dive deeper.
But also you might not need it.
That's
like
true.
I feel like for me it really like helps kind of smoothing out some like dynamics, and it might be the thing that like kind of like turns it over to where the vocals need to be. Especially if you're like experimenting with like where you put it in the chain as well, but usually like at the end it just has like a final sort of like pumping sort of like control. But if you're going for more dynamic things, maybe you don't need it as well. You know, I'd be doing like I don't know, compression is such a weird conversation because you know I might feel like I'm doing like, you know, not a lot of compression compared to like other people, and then some people are like, that's a lot of compression. I'm like, I know.
It's funny. I think it's obviously source dependent.
And
it's again, does it sound good?
No, exactly.
Do you like the sound?
And does the artist like it?
Does the artist like it? And our tastes change over time.
No, exactly.
So we're going to listen back in 5 years and go, I fucking used to use that all the time. Why did I use that all the time?
I've cut back. I've cut back on a lot of compression recently. This last year, I went to America for a little bit and learned a lot, and came back and realized that there was a lot of things that I was missing, which was super, super good. But compressions,
Any other Desert Island plugins that you're like,
Desert Island plugins. I mean, the God Particle is pretty good. I'm not going to lie.
On the mix bus?
On the mix bus, It's nice. It's nice. And like, again, like visually, like, you know, if Jason Joshua has set up a thing that says like, if you need more bass, he'll tell you if there's more bass. It's kind of like an easy being like, okay, this is the ballpark for like one of the, you know, one of the biggest, most successful like engineers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, it's there for you, which I think is great as well. And especially for people who don't understand it as well, I think it's like a great way to send off demos and for producers even to put it on their mix bus for like their songs. Like they'll understand that it'll like really, you know, excite it and control and brighten it up. And then so I've been using that a lot. The limiter on it, I'm kind of skeptical about still, as like a lot of people might be. But I think this is a great plugin.
Love it.
And they just brought out a vocal plugin as well.
Cool.
That's like a CLA vocal,
Right.
that does like everything.
Yeah.
And it's like low latency.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it yet, but I think, you know, I think
If it's as good
I
as
think
the
they're
God
killing
Particle,
it.
then
I think they're killing it. It's not from Jason Joshua. It's from Lewis
company.
Bell.
Okay.
Lewis Bell, I think, and he like does Post Malone stuff.
Cool.
And so, you know, another like god. So
yeah.
Trying to think what other plugins.
What about distortion, reverbs?
Distortion, yeah, definitely Decapitator.
Yep.
The Sound Toys plugin. I can't live without Little Altar Boy. And Micro Shift as well is a great one that I use on back ends to to use as like a doubler. It's really nice.
Yep.
Especially if you have like a client that like sends like not a lot of layers, it really gives it like that depth of like, oh wow, like that just added so much more interest to the mix.
Yep.
Love
it.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, I know.
There's so many, and everything's different. But
well, I like there's another question that I ask that is another difficult question. But what do you feel like is a good mix? When you either hear a professionally done mix or even something that you've worked on, what is it about that mix that you're like,
I think
nailed it?
I think like there's something to do with like the space used. And if everything is kind of like, okay, for me personally, it's can I hear the vocals? That's like a big thing for me. Because a lot of the older sort of songs and you know, props to, it's definitely genre based as well. But a lot of the music that I grew up on, you kind of can't hear the vocals sometimes. And that's a shame because I feel like me coming from my background, it's like I want to hear the vocals. And from a producer's perspective, it might be the other way. You want to hear the really, really like cool synth idea that you put in. But for me, it's just like the vocals and how everything is balanced is really important. And if I can hear the bass, like I do like bass. So like if the bass is hitting nice in the car and you can hear the vocals and the production and there's like a lot of ear candy, like creative stuff. Like I don't know if you listen to a lot of like hyper pop.
I've dabbled.
I've dabbled. Like the creative sort of world that is now music it's insane. It's hard to keep up sometimes as well. I have some friends that are extremely talented in that sort of realm where it's like, how did you make that sound?
Yeah, that's to me is some of the most fun stuff that I can do in a production is like, how do I like spice this up? How do I get creative and just flex that muscle that you don't get to flex very often when you're just recording or, you know, or like even mixing is like, it's so important that you impart like your creativity on it.
Of course.
You know, absolutely
always.
it's important to get what the artist wants, but it's like if we can't show our character through the work that we do, it won't be as impactful. No, in my
course.
opinion.
It's like it's just asking you to do your job and you know, very grateful to do the work that
for sure.
we do. But then like having you and having the trust to be creative and to do our thing, it's like it's good. It feels good.
Yeah.
It makes it like a bit more worth it because it's like, oh, I'm actually gonna put myself into this song. Like they don't mind if you know, if you hear something, you just do it, right? And if they don't like it, then that's cool. But
and again, the communication thing's huge.
Communication is huge.
Like, and I always like to, you know, and I've heard people making multiple mixes, which to me is a lot of effort. But I'd rather just say, hey, I did this in the second verse.
let me know what
you
think.
Is it too much?
Yeah.
I can dial it back.
That's what I say. I always go crazy on the first mix.
Yeah.
And then we dial it back.
Yep.
It's better to like experiment, and it's like if I'm in the zone and I'm feeling something and something works out and it feels right to me, but then like it obviously like sometimes it doesn't work out for the client, then that's cool. Like we tried.
Yeah.
I tried.
That's it.
Then,
Yeah. It's all part of the creative process.
No, exactly.
Before I finish up, I always like to ask advice for, first of all, engineers, and then what advice you can give to artists as well.
Oh, that's a hard one. Engineers and artists. I think for engineers, just like trust your ears and collaborate. It doesn't hurt to send your music to other people. It doesn't matter if they're consumers or they're other engineers. I think the only way that you can improve is through collaboration. I think I wouldn't be where I am without my like solid sort of like circle of like artists, engineer, producers. So that's extremely important. And then for artists as well, I think listen to your favorite artists and like kind of like take away from what they're doing. You know, if there's like a nice layer that you can hear them doing, implement that into your own song. Like, I feel like a lot of people are trying to kind of like steer from like copying, but you can always take inspiration, and it really can like take your song to the next level as well. Just like listening to, I think like layers is extremely important as an artist.
Love that.
Yeah, it gives it so much more dimension.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful.
What else? Yeah,
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Nah, I love it, man. Well, where can people find you online if they want to get in touch, if they want to keep up with you?
You can find me on Instagram at AOTrae. So it's AYOTRAEE. And I think that's the only place you can find me at the moment.
Beautiful. No,
cheers.
that's
Thank
good,
you
man.
so much, Stu. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. It was my pleasure. And we'll stay in touch and we'll keep everyone updated with anything that happens in the future with you. And
Awesome.
Thank you all for taking some time out to listen or watch the podcast. It means the world. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe or follow. You can stay up to date with all the new releases and share it with a friend. That's how we can get the word out to as many people as possible. That is the goal. We want to share this to the world.
Share the knowledge.
That's it. Well, thank you. And we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.